Ministério da Cultura e Governo do Estado de São Paulo, por meio da Secretaria da Cultura, Economia e Indústria Criativas, apresentam Inédit Brasil, Festival Internacional do Documentário Musical, de 17 a 28 de junho de 2026 em São Paulo. Online para todo o Brasil. Filmes, encontros, debates, shows e festas. Consulte a programação em in-edit-brasil.com. @InéditBrasil. Cartelas de apoiadores e patrocinadores. Do lado esquerdo do quadro, Alison Ellwood. Ela é uma mulher branca, de meia idade e cabelos grisalhos. Ela usa óculos, uma camiseta de flanela e um colete de couro claro. Ao fundo, uma sala e um corredor enfeitados com quadros e mobílias. Do lado direito do quadro, Duda Leite, um homem branco, de meia idade e careca. Ele usa uma camisa preta e um kimono colorido. Ao fundo, uma sala enfeitada com quadros, livros e discos.
Olá, eu sou Duda Leite e eu estou hoje aqui batendo papo com a cineasta Alison Ellwood. Esta masterclass faz parte da 18ª edição do Festival Inédit, o Festival de Documentários Musicais. A produtora, diretora e montadora australiana Alison Ellwood tem uma longa história com os documentários musicais e com o Inédit. Este ano ela está com um novo filme na mostra internacional, Boy George and Culture Club, sobre a icônica banda inglesa. Mas antes disso, Alison já participou do Inédit 2 outras vezes com os documentários Let the Canary Sing, sobre a Cyndi Lauper, e The Go-Go's, sobre o icônico grupo de garotas New Wave. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you. Great to be here with you.
Thank you. So to start with, I'd like to ask you, what was your first contact with musical documentaries? What triggered you to want to do them?
Well, I've always worked a lot in documentaries about culture, and in doing so, we've always used lots of music, especially with my longtime partner, Alex Gibney. Music has always been a big part of the storytelling. And then, well, I guess when the Eagles film came to us, that was the first time I sort of went into the rock doc sphere, shall we say. So that was sort of the first, like, about the music film that I did. Actually, that's not true. There was something a long time before that. But anyway, that's sort of how I got into it. And then because of that film and the success of that film, a lot of other bands started approaching me and saying they wanted to tell their story. And, I just always say, look, this is a mutual pact of honesty. You guys have to be honest with me, and I'll be honest in the storytelling.
But what do you think makes the musical documentary so compelling? Meaning, like, of course, they connect two things that I guess we both love, and everybody that's watching us, which is movies and music, right? Cinema and music. So,
yes. I mean, music is sort of a universal language. It speaks to all of us, no matter what language it's in. It can speak to you. It can evoke emotions. I love telling stories about human drama and as a microcosm for the rest of us, that we all share these dramas in our lives and struggles and this and that. And with musical bands and even individual musical artists, that drama tends to be heightened because there's so much creativity on the line, so much creative control on the line, and the frictions that come about either internally within bands and often from the outside make for very compelling storytelling. And plus the music, as I said, is universal, so it speaks to us in an emotional way.
Yeah. And Alison, one of your first documentaries was Magic Trip, Ken Kesey, Search for a Cool Place, which, by the way, you co-directed with Alex Gibney.
Correct,
just
yes.
mentioned. That's not exactly a music documentary, but of course it has a lot of music in it. So I guess, like, how was that first experience? I don't know if that was the first one you co-directed with Alex, was it?
I think that was the only one we co-directed. Yeah, I mean, that film took a long time to do. It was like 5 years in the making because Marty Scorsese's film fund was gracious enough to help finance the restoration of the footage because Ken and his gang of merry pranksters had edited that film over and over and over and never made duplicates. So it was an absolute mess to reconstruct all of that footage and to refurbish it. And it literally took 5 years. We'd get a big batch, we'd do some work, we'd wait, do something else, and come back. But I mean, obviously, The Grateful Dead was a big part of that story. The music of the 60s was a big part of that story. But in that case, it was just driven by these, wonderful, wacky characters that had this vision of what America was and could be, and I think ultimately failed terribly, probably largely due to the massive amounts of drugs that were involved with that story, and in their inability to tell it themselves because they couldn't stay sober long enough to figure out how to put the film together.
Well, I guess that's something that you struggle with in your future projects, like for instance, Laurel Canyon and even the Go-Go's, and I don't know, did that happen with other projects that you work with? I mean, the problem that you couldn't get exactly the right stories from the people that were there.
No, not really. I mean, Magic Trip was its own difficulty just because of the restoration of the footage. There was a lot of archive that we were able to use. But no, I mean, the other things were, obviously I researched the stories very thoroughly before I go in, so I know what I'm looking for. And we found, I've had worked with amazing archival producers that are able to find footage that helps tell the story. And like I said, when I go to interview these musicians and artists, it's a pact of mutual trust. And like Belinda Carlisle, for instance, said she wanted Final Cut, and I said no. And trust me, you don't want it because you'll make it so one-sided that it won't be a true story. Just by nature, not because she's a selfish person or anything. It's just human nature to try to control your own story, which is why I keep saying it's an issue of trust.
But it's interesting that you said that because I guess that that those subjects, I mean, this concern about the talents being portrayed in a documentary is always an issue, right? So, for instance, jumping to your latest film, which is Boy George and Culture Club, how did you got Boy George to trust you for that one?
Well, I interviewed Boy George for the Cyndi Lauper film, and we hit it off. And they wanted to do a film, so they came to us, and we kind of pursued each other mutually. And George finally agreed to do it. And then it took a little bit more convincing to get the Mikey and Roy on board, and then John was sort of the toughest one to get on board. But we finally did. He was the last interview we did, and he was just absolutely lovely. In some ways, I think he steals the show.
Mm. Well, we're gonna go back to this one, but I wanna. Sorry, I jumped
It's
forward, but
okay.
coming back again. Your following projects were from the band, one documentary on the band The Eagles that you already mentioned them, and
Yes.
also American Jihad from 12
Yes.
2017, which was a very political team documentary. So what was the appeal for these two different stories? Of course, the Eagles, it's back to music, and the American Jihad is about politics.
Right. Well, I kind of started my career doing more political stuff, actually. The music was sort of a departure from that, but again, it all comes from the culture. And I mean, I just thought that, again, it's about human stories and to understand what drives these, for the most part, young people to take such drastic, radical um, choose such paths in their lives. Why do they do that? How do they do that? And how are they coerced? And what is it of their own story that makes them vulnerable to things like that? It's ultimately all these stories are about vulnerability. And and some people use that to be creative, and other people can be destructive if they're misled.
Oh, interesting too. I always love to find a point in common, in the films,
Yeah.
and yeah, vulnerability makes sense, of course, from your
Yeah, I
films.
mean, Jesse Morton in American Jihad was this kid who got just completely derailed, as did the Zernaev brothers. I mean, I don't think these people were born evil. They were turned into believing something and had a desperate dealt with it in a desperate way. And it was about getting to the roots of how that happens and why that happens, which is why we had all those kids like scrolling the internet. It's even worse now because there are algorithms that direct you to go down these dark paths.
Yes. And Alison, jumping to the Go-Go's, you already mentioned Belinda Carlisle that she
Yeah.
wanted to have the final cut. So how did you convince her to that it was not a good idea? And also, were you a fan of the Go-Go's before? I mean, you started doing the documentary.
Yeah.
What can you tell about that process?
Yeah, I was a huge Go-Go's fan, and I just loved the all of those girls are they're just they're honestly they're so kick-ass. I mean, honestly, the discussion with Belinda about Final Cut was literally that. I said, no, you can't have it because you'll skew it and it won't be an honest story. And she said, okay, fine. And yeah, I mean, they liked the Eagles film. They actually liked American Jihad as well, so they understood I could do that. I wasn't like just one path that I was taking. They understood the storytelling and they wanted to tell their story. And the greatest thing to me about both the Go-Go's film and the Eagles film is that both those films ended up being healing for the members of the band. In the Eagles, Bernie ended up touring and made up with Glenn, thankfully, before he passed away. And the Go-Go's, when they saw the screening at Sundance, it was like they finally realized that all of their infighting was like, what was that for? Look what we created. And it was very healing. And that to me is like the greatest gift.
Oh, that's so nice to hear because I think that must be most the most rewarding thing for you, right? More even than awards, for instance, because
For sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think to some extent the Culture Club film is healing, certainly for Roy and Mikey. Um, I don't know so much for John. I think John still feels the pain of that fissure in the band, but I hope that at some time he'll recognize that it could be a healing thing for them.
Mm. And what
Because
about
there really was true love among all of them, not just the love story between John and George, but between all of them, there was a magical love that created this energy that produced this amazing music. And in that story, excuse me, one of the things that I kind of was reminded of in working on it was how great some of their music really was. Because you think of just the big hits like Karma Chameleon, which I never was that big a fan of that particular song, and the band wasn't either, frankly. Well, George was, but the others not so much. But the
yeah.
other, I mean, Church of the Poison Mind, I mean, what a song. I mean, some of those songs are just brilliant. And on some of the later albums, even there's brilliant songs that I think people certainly will recognize them, but I think may have forgotten how extensive their work was.
Well, I have to say, I was actually gonna find here in the back, you can see I have a vinyl collection, and I
Yes,
do have all the Culture Club albums, even the ones, the third one, which they mention in the documentary that was not well
right.
received, and it was that supposedly was not a good one. I disagree because I think it's brilliant. But
I
anyways,
think they're great songs on it.
yeah, and but I agree because their music was so fantastic. When did you find out that their story, George and Jones, was the basis of the for your film and also for the band, really, right?
I mean, it's their origin story. So, I mean, I knew it going in that that was the origin story. I certainly their love is a huge focus of the film because so many of the songs were written from George's angst and emotional state about that particular relationship. But it was really these four guys that had this chemistry that came together that without one of them, it wouldn't have been the same. Each one of them brings something very unique that made that sound, which is very unique. Nobody else sounds like them.
Yes, and I would like to talk a little bit about the footage that you use. Actually, not only in Culture Club, but in all your films. Like how I imagine when you go into a project, like for instance, Culture Club or Go-Go's or Cyndi Lauper, you have a million of hours of archival
Mhm.
footage to choose from. So how do you can you talk a little bit about that process? Like, do you have researchers working with you, and how did you end up with the final selection of images?
Well, we have amazing archival producers that work on all these documentaries, and without them, these films would not be nearly as good as they are. People that have connections that can dig in deep. In the Eagles, for instance, they had filmed this concert in the 70s, and they had the footage, the 16 millimeter footage that actually had been preserved, but the audio that went along with it, nobody knew where that was. So we had these crappy line feeds that we were working with that really sounded awful. And that's the spine of that film, is that concert going back and forth to it. And finally, those reel-to-reel recordings were found in someone's garage that had been, heat, cold. They literally were baked. They made it through the machine once and disintegrated, but we got the sound from it. So that's a case of archival people digging deep and finding these things. But these guys, they're professionals. They know where to dig. They know where to look. In Culture Club, Roy's ex-wife, she ended up having a treasure trove of material for us and photographs and everything. And she was lovely and gave us all the material. So they just dig deep, far and wide. And sometimes we don't find gems until the last minute. And we have to restructure things to accommodate new footage that we find. It's very much the spine of the work that we do in these music films is the archival.
Nice. And talking still about, of course, Culture Club, one thing that called my attention a lot in the documentary is when they go to the US and,
Mhm.
when George says that he's a drag queen and the
Yeah.
reaction that happens. Do you think that was very shocking for me because not shocking because it was a surprise. I mean, I know, of course, the US had that thing, but do you think today, do you think the United States change a little bit the mentality towards, the sexuality of of a musician, let's say? Do you think that's got a little bit better since then?
I think the general population is definitely much better, but in terms of the political scene in America, it's much, much worse. We have these lunatics in charge right now who are hateful, 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 and homophobic, and all this trans backlash, which, George mentions in the film. He says, back then it was us, now it's the trans they're going after.
Mm.
And so I think generally people, especially younger people, could care less what someone's sexuality is. As long as no one's hurting anybody, they don't care. But the politics in this country, sadly, is in a much worse shape today than it was.
Mm. Do you think, in that sense, George was a trailblazer in terms of, calling? Because I think it was spontaneous when he said that. I don't think
Yeah,
he knew what was gonna happen, right?
no. I
But
mean, it's also in Britain, it's very different. I mean, the drag queen concept in Britain is not frowned upon in any way. Never, it's very culturally inclusive. I mean, there's a lot of the British have a much different approach to it to begin with. So I think he was utterly shocked by the backlash. I think he made a joke. He thought it was funny. And like he says on, I can't remember, I guess it's Carson or Letter, I can't remember in the film, but he says, "You guys have Liberace. How am I any worse than that?" And we ignore Liberace, but Conan and Boy George, that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love that quote. And I love Liberace on a personal level. So actually,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyways, so you said about you talked about your films being healing. I'd like to talk a little bit. We can go back to Boy George later, of course, but I'd like to ask about Cyndi Lauper. Do you think
Yeah.
how was that experience with her, and do you think it was healing for her as well? Because I think Cyndi Lauper, it's a very amazing artist, of course, but she didn't. I mean, I found an article here in the Brazilian press that compare her to Madonna when Madonna was beginning, and the journalist said that Madonna, like, who was that girl? Like, meaning that Madonna had no chance to be in the same level as Cyndi Lauper. And of course, as years went through, we know that that was not really what happened. Meaning, like, Madonna became bigger than Cyndi Lauper, although again, she's a wonderful singer. So, do you think it was healing for her in that sense as well, of bringing her, not respect the amount of awareness that she deserved?
I would imagine so. I think for Cindy, because she had that high-pitched voice and put on that very ditzy act, the people thought she was much younger when she hit it big. She was 30. So many of these kids are like 20 when they hit it. She had gone through so much, and I think that for her, I obviously you'd have to ask her, but I suspect for her, having people understand how hard she worked, how seriously she took her craft to get to the point where she made it big. I mean, as her vocal coach says in the film, she spent 10 years becoming an overnight sensation. And and I think that for Cindy, that at least my perspective is that for the people to understand what she actually went through to get there and how much of a fighter she was for herself and thus others, because she went through that struggle, she could use her voice to help others. So I think that for her, I wouldn't necessarily think it's healing. I think that it was hopefully satisfying and rewarding to her for people to understand what a true fighter she was, both for herself and for the people she advocates for.
And so was easy to convince her to make the documentary? How was the approach with her? Like you said, that the Go-Go's approached you, but like with Cindy, how was it?
It was a little back and forth. I think I mean, so many of these artists were nervous about doing docs, largely because of Behind the Music series that was very salacious. I mean, it was a, good series in that it got stories out and stuff, but often they focused a lot on the salacious aspect. So these artists are always a little nervous about that. And for me, I just say that's not, look, your story is your story, and there are parts of it that are dramatic and salacious, then fine, we're including it, but we're not focusing. That's not the focus. The focus is your journey, what you went through, how you came up with the songs, what's your creative process? What's your collaborative process? And when do those, like in the Go-Go's, that fractured a whole lot. With Cindy, she was more of a solo artist, but all of the artists that she worked with that helped her get to where she is, she still works to this day.
Yes, you mentioned something that is interesting because in all documentaries, there is always obviously a point of view from the director. So, for instance, the Chilean documentarian Patricio Guzman wrote in his book that it's impossible to have a documentary, an unbiased documentary. The documentaries are always going to be the vision of the director. So, I'd like to ask you, like, how do you choose or how do you work with this vision? You have from the stories. I mean, how do you make them, let's say, not biased in terms of, for instance, you said in the Culture Club there was all those fights, like so. How do you don't take sides and show all the different points of view, but still maintaining your own point of view?
I mean, there's certainly truth to the minute you point a camera at something, you're not biased because you're focusing on something. To me, it's always the story, and to tell the story honestly and what happened and who was responsible for things and who was, really with a creative spark, and how the combustion of that works is the focus always of the stories that I tell, whether it's a single artist and fighting against the machine of the industry, like in Cindy's case, or whether it's the Go-Go's or the Eagles kind of imploding on themselves, and to some extent Culture Club that imploded a little bit. But it's just, to me, it's about the story and the creative impulse. That's what fascinates me. And I am a fan of the music. I admit that. I think you kind of have to be to get into that. And I was working on pitching a country women in country music documentary series several years back, and before working on it, I really wouldn't have considered myself a country music fan. Now I'm a huge country music fan. So, I mean, I do think you have to love and respect the music to some extent to be able to dig in, because you have to get the music. That's the spine is the music.
Yeah, well, I have to say that I'm very biased towards your films because I'm a big 80s
Yeah,
fan, of course. So, Culture Club, Cyndi Lauper, and the Go-Go's. I mean, you got
yeah.
me. That's yeah, I really like it. So, do you think that's like do you think the 80s was maybe that's nostalgic, and I don't like to be nostalgic, but do you think the 80s were what made the 80s such a great time for music? There's three artists that we mentioned uh had. started their careers in the 80s. So what cultural, melt pot was happening that made this music so good? Or maybe it's just because our generation and it brings us back
I
also.
think it's that. I mean, look at the 60s and the or the 50s before that. I mean, I think every generation has these magical musical explosions. The 80s, I mean, it's weird because it was such an odd time for so many things. It was an odd time politically. It was an odd time for fashion. I mean, horrible, horrible fashion. But you look back on it now with a nostalgia, like, well, that's kind of great. But the 60s, I mean, there's all these generations. One thing about the 80s is it was the real advent of video, so there's a lot more footage. The bad side of that, though, is back before that, there was film footage that holds up much better than especially the early 80s footage. So in the Go-Go's, for instance, we really embraced the sort of crappy video technology aspect, like had, like the graphics were all breaking up and had that kind of weird 80s thing. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I do think that every generation has their voice that comes out. I mean, some people would say that the 90s and grunge was a huge, I mean, you look, every generation has their music. I think for those of us of a certain age where we grew up with that, it has a certain nostalgia. But I don't know that it was a better era than any other for music. I mean, certainly.
Of course. Yeah, and I have to ask you the fact that I mean you are a woman director of the musical documentaries, and that's not so common. Let's say, well, I understand, of course, in movies in general, women are always a minority. We can see that through the Oscars, but that's changing, luckily,
Yeah.
of course, thankfully. And so, do you feel that the fact that you are a woman brings a different point of view to these films at all, or not at all?
I don't know because I can't tell you because I'm not a guy. So, I'm who I am, and like I said, it's all about story to me. That's my focus, and loving the music and loving that music in general, whatever era, genre of music, reaches people in a deep emotional way, and in a way that other things don't. I mean, it has a way of cutting through that's really unique, which is why I think it's such a special area to work in, and I feel really lucky to be able to explore that and different types of music, different genres.
But specifically in the projects of Cyndi Lauper and also the Go-Go's, I mean, the Go-Go's were the first new wave girl band, right? It's not, of course, the first girl band because even
Right.
in the 60s we had like the Supremes, the Shangri-Las,
Yeah.
and all of those. So, but yeah, in the punk new wave scene, they were the first ones.
There was no Svengali with them. They were their own, they created themselves.
Exactly. So that's a different thing. Was that something that caught your attention,
Sure, it's part of the story. It's part
yeah.
of the story. They were, charging ahead on their own. And the I love the early days of the Go-Go's. I mean, I wish we could have. I mean, I wanted to do a fiction version of it because the early formation of them is those stories are so hilariously funny. Like they'd show what I mean, I can't even go into the details, but like so much stuff that we couldn't include in the film for time reasons. Like the really early days was just hysterically funny, and how completely they had no idea what they were doing. And yet they look what they did.
Yeah,
Sheer
amazing.
determination, and they got better, and they learned their craft. And obviously that's not true of Charlotte and Kathy, but the other, or Gina actually, but certainly for Belinda and Jane, they really learned. They all did. They learned together. But anyway, I hope that
No,
answered the question.
sure. No, and you said something very interesting because I was curious about that. I know, of course, I love documentaries, obviously. So do all of us here at Inedit. But do you have the will maybe to go into fiction? You just said that, for instance, it would be a great go-go movies like a fiction version. Would you be interested in doing this
Yeah,
transition and working on that?
100%. I've tried to pitch things a few times, and yeah, definitely, because like I said, some of the stuff that we don't have time to get into in these documentaries that are telling a story from, point A to point B, or Z. Like the early days of the Go's, I would have loved to have done a fiction version of that, like telling, but based on their real story. but to get into the details, that no, it would be amazing. And those stories are so rich. I mean, any one of those films could make a great series.
Exactly. I'm just thinking the Boy George story. I mean, come on, it would be
Amazing.
amazing.
It would be
But
amazing.
yeah, but there would be a huge challenge in that one, which would be like who would play George?
I
That I
know.
mean, of course we
It,
can find somebody, but yeah. And Alison, speaking coming back to the Boy George one, I would like to ask you, there is of course a moment that you talk about his drug addictions and how the drugs mess with his mind and his life basically. And do you think Marilyn, the way you portrayed Marilyn in the film, kind of make it for me, it was like she was not the reason why, but she was a force to George into that direction. Was that the case? I mean, do you agree with that?
I think you can't blame Marilyn for what George decided to do because George was George and he had, he had control of what he was doing. I think he was lost and was seeking refuge somehow and found it with Marilyn. But I certainly don't blame Marilyn for what happened. There was a whole scene. I mean, it was the 80s, for God's sake, there were drugs everywhere. It's like what was surprising to me was to learn that that George wasn't doing drugs up to that point. I just always assume everybody was. And Cindy too. Cindy did drugs once and realized it was hurting her voice, and she's like, never again. And George, they say in the film, George went from, no drugs to a heroin addict basically overnight. George would argue it wasn't overnight, which in all fairness, sure, it wasn't, but it's in the time compression of the Culture Club story, it was a very quick decline
Hmm.
or
And
descent, I should say.
yeah, and so do you have, for instance, if the people that are watching this interview, if they want to make a musical documentary, because of course we like to think, to make more people interested in the genre, which basically tips would you give them, to do a musical documentary? Like, what was the, yeah.
Find music you love, find a story you love, find an artist you feel deserves to have their story told, and there's probably countless of them out there. But it's again, it's all about story. Is the story interesting? Because they're one-hit wonders, those stories might be fascinating too, but do they sustain a full documentary or a series? You know, you have to be passionate about what you do, and if you're not passionate, you don't care, then there's no point.
Well, you of course seem very passionate about what you do,
I
so
am.
yeah, I'm happy to see that. And do you have any projects that you are currently working at that you can share with us? Like which artists would you love to do a documentary now?
I'm working on several possibilities. I'm not at liberty to discuss what they are, unfortunately. But sure, there's a lot of artists out there that I would love to tell their story. But I'm not at liberty to say who I'm potentially working with right now.
Okay. Oh, that's okay. And another thing. So, what do you think? You mentioned many times the power of the story. So that would be the main focus you think on a musical documentary.
Yes, yeah,
And
and yeah, and to find the connections and how, if it's a band, how they interrelate with one another, what their the origin story where they led to, and obviously an obstacle. They need to go through something. If they don't go through something, the story is less interesting. But everybody goes through stuff because that's where it connects to human beings. We all have ups and downs. And we all, hit roadblocks in our lives that feel insurmountable. And then what do you do to get through it? And what I love about the musicians is that they do it through their music, through their creativity. Almost always they work it through that way.
yeah, no, it's interesting you say that because that's a common thread that we can see in almost all the rock documentaries or music documentaries, which is
Yeah.
exactly, like the success, the decay for some point, and then
Right.
the third act, let's say the
Right.
coming back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
do you think
rise and fall and resurrection.
exactly? Thank you. Yes. So,
Yeah.
so do you think that's like a common thing for like human beings in general? And then it's
Yeah,
of
I
course Titan.
do. I do. I think it's a little bit more pronounced I mean, one film I am working on, I can tell you, is The Black Crows. I just love those guys, and what a story of rise, fall, and resurrection. I mean, they're huge now. And we're hoping to get that finally made. We've been working on it a while. And that's an amazing story and amazing music again, and the brothers and their story. I mean, talk about drama. But you know that they've come back to one another because their kids wanted to know their cousins, and so they made up, and they're doing them, and they're doing great. It's a great, wonderful story with great, incredible music, and their music. They're creating new music. They're not just going out and doing their old hits. They're creating new music that's like blowing things away right now. It's so exciting. I'm very proud of them, actually.
Oh, that's nice to hear. So maybe next year you'll be back at
Let's
Inedit with the
hope.
new one. Yes.
Let's hope.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Alison. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
doing
It was
this.
lovely to speak with you. And a big shout out to my friends David, Elena, and Rio.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.